Today, we're going to talk about Hoyas. Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Sarah, and today we are going to talk about caring for your Hoyas. Before I get into it, don't forget to take a moment, if you're not already, hit that subscribe button and remember to like this video. And without further ado, let's get into talking about how to care for your Hoyas. The first factor that I have for you today is the amount of light that your Hoyas are getting. I have found this is the number one biggest factor that affects how my Hoyas grow. It's just the thing that if you change nothing else about how you care for your Hoyas, look at how much light they're getting. I have found that my Hoyas really are particular about the type of light that they get, especially if you want them to show a lot of growth. I find that a high to really strong medium indirect light for these Hoyas is most important. They will survive in a little bit lower light. I have a couple that kind of are maybe in a more medium, true medium indirect light, but they don't put on as much growth as the ones that get the high indirect light. If you check out my plant tour video, you will see that a lot of my Hoyas are in locations where they can get even a little bit of direct light sometimes, mostly in east or west facing windows. I actually did have through the summer a lot of Hoyas sitting directly in my east facing window. Both my east and west facing windows do have trees that kind of filter some of the light that are coming through. It's not a complete blockage, but it might kind of block some of the light at some of the strongest parts of the day. I have moved those plants out of the window now that the weather's getting a little bit colder. I don't want to risk them freezing, and they were pressed right up against the glass. Be sure to check out that plant tour if you're curious about the exact placement. But most of my Hoyas are actually in places where they are very close to even south facing windows. Not directly in the south facing windows. The sun here is extremely strong, so I don't want to risk getting them burnt. But the strongest, the most light that you can give your Hoyas is the most important thing. I have found that my Hoyas that are closer to bright light do the very best. The next factor that I have found influences my Hoyas the most is in watering. I've seen a few conflicting things on the internet. I'll share with you how I water my Hoyas. Doesn't mean it's the right way. Again, my climate is very dry, and they get a ton of light, so that really affects how often I water. Be sure to always check your watering and make sure it's working for your plants in your location, but I'll share with you what I do for my Hoyas. So any of my thicker, more succulent type Hoyas, like my obovata here, has nice thick leaves. I actually do let these dry out completely. I check on them maybe once a week with my moisture meter. And if they're dry, I water them. I like to see if I can get them to go a day or two even with completely dry soil. I find they really actually enjoy that. So that goes for any of my thicker leaved Hoyas. So the carnosas, the obovata, the pupacalyx, any of that kind of stuff, I really let dry out completely, even sit a day or two completely dry before I water them. The other type of Hoya that I have is the thin-leafed varieties. So I have here the Hoya Australis Lisa, which is the variegated variety. I also have my Hoya Bella. Both of those have much thinner leaves to them, and I find these prefer to stay just slightly moist. So if I'm using my moisture meter, just as soon as it starts to dip between the moist into the dry category, that's when I'm going to give them a little bit of water. I probably check these with that moisture meter every 4 or 5 days, so I might check them a couple times throughout the week just to see where they are at. They do prefer to be a little bit more on the moist side, but for the most part I have found that my Hoyas much prefer to dry out completely in between waterings, and then I give them a nice solid soak. Another factor about Hoyas I take into consideration is how light and airy they like the soil. I actually, for my potting mixes for most of my Hoyas, use almost entirely orchid bark, sometimes a little bit of coconut coir. If the majority of it is actually made up of those two ingredients with just a little bit of potting soil and perlite mixed in, that I have found works the best. So it's probably 60 to 70% bark or coconut coir or things like that, and then the rest is made up kind of that perlite and potting mix. The drier, the quicker it can actually dry out and the more airy it is, those are the plants that I am finding actually grow the fastest. Again, that applies mostly to the ones that do like to dry out. The thicker leaves like the obovata, I do have my Bella and my Australis in a little bit more moisture dense soil, but not by a whole lot. They still do really like that light and airy soil. Those are the things that are working really well for my Hoyas. So most of my Hoyas are actually potted up in the plastic pots. I find that works pretty well for me. It is an environment where things tend to dry out a lot. The air here is very dry. Like I said, everything gets a lot of sun. So I do find that the plastic nursery pots, by and large, for most of my plants, my Hoyas included, work really, really well. They retain just enough moisture that I'm not watering them every couple of days. I can let them go for several days, a week, even sometimes longer than a week before they fully dry out. So the plastic pots is what I recommend. As far as feeding my Hoyas, I don't change up a whole lot from what I used to feed most of my plants. I subscribe to the philosophy that feeding very, very weekly on a more regular basis is much better for the plant than feeding it strongly every once in a while, much less regularly. So what I do is I find the already diluted plant food. This is the Miracle Grow. I have no particular attachment to this. This is just what I happen to have on hand. It is already diluted, so theoretically, it's meant to be poured directly on the plant. However, I never, ever, ever do that. I take maybe a couple tablespoons worth of this and a couple drops worth of the Super Thrive, which I do love and I highly recommend. I put a little bit of these two things together in a watering can and use that to water my plants. I have found this works really, really, really well. If I use that combination, I see new leaves within a day or two. There's always new growth popping up. And I do that maybe every 2 to 3 weeks. It really just depends on my personal schedule and when I do get around to watering my plants, do I have the extra time to go and feed them or not? Sometimes I can't remember when the last time I fed my plants was, so I like to do it nice and weekly so that it doesn't overpower and actually burn the plants. As far as propagating Hoyas, I have had huge success propagating my plants. I propagate my Hoya Bella all the time. If you want to see a more in-depth video on how to propagate, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to go more in-depth. I do have a couple plants that I could actually take propagations from, this obovata being one of them. So if I were to take a cutting of this plant, I would probably take my scissors and go somewhere here below. You want about 3 leaves. You can do it with 2, you can do it with more, but I would probably take my scissors or my clippers and cut just here above these 2 leaves. That leaves me 3 leaves here, and I have amazing success with propagating my Hoyas in water. I've had a couple varieties that even are supposed to be a little bit stubborn or difficult. I stick them in a glass of water, propagate them, and within a week or 2 I have roots on them, especially with my Hoya Bella. The main factor that I have found with those propagations is they also love a lot of light. They are between my east and south facing windows here in my plant room, and when they get that huge amount of light, lots of warmth, lots of humidity, I find that they will put on roots very, very quickly for me, and I've had huge success with water propagating my Hoyas. As far as humidity goes for my Hoyas, a lot of you know I live in a desert. I am struggling to keep humidity in my plant room, in my house, at what most people would consider normal household levels. So if I can keep my humidity somewhere between 40 and 50, I feel like I'm doing really, really well. If it goes above 50, I feel like I'm having a great day. So I have found that Hoyas are really not that particular about the amount of humidity in the house. Like I said, somewhere between that 40 and 50 is where I usually am on any given day, just kind of depending what the weather's doing outside. I have not had any struggles with them. I have found they do prefer a little bit more humidity. They might put on extra growth, or the propagations might root a little bit quicker on those days that there is a little bit higher humidity. But as far as the finickiness of the plants, hi Loki. Hi Loki, I'm filming. Yes, I know. Guys, say hi to Loki. Loki, say hi to everybody. Oh, I know. Oh, I know. Loki, do you like Hoyas? Loki, do you like Hoyas, huh? So apparently Loki wants to be in the video now. But as far as the humidity goes for my Hoyas, I found they're not particularly finicky, definitely nowhere near as finicky as my calatheas, my orchids, things like that. They tend to have much less needs. They're not going to scream and yell at you if you don't give them enough humidity. So since Loki obviously is here, wants some attention, wants to play, I am going to go and pay a little bit of actual attention to my favorite plant, my Loki. So I hope you guys found this information very, very helpful. If you have specific questions about Hoyas, about a specific kind of Hoya, please put that in the comments below. I'm always happy to either answer on your comment, or if it's something that warrants a video, I will make a video about it. So don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, and I will see you all next week. Bye.